Hi guys, Matteo Dummar here. Welcome back to a brand new video. So today's video, we're gonna be, as you might have guessed from the title, comparing the magnetic Lingao clock and the newest clock released by Qiyi. So yeah, this video is gonna be separated in a few parts. So first of all, I'll be discussing the key differences between these two clocks. Then I'll be having like a 50 average of 50 with both clocks, and showing you guys my best average of 5 with each out of this average of 50, just for context purpose. Obviously an average of 5 does not determine which clock is better, so don't take the times of that average as proof of one clock being better than the other, but kind of just to show you how they perform while being solved. And then I'll be discussing this average of 50 with each clock, saying what I liked, what I didn't like, what I preferred on one clock rather than the other one, and yeah, and then finally conclude on this comparison video. Now, what I do want to state first is that this clock is from 2018, so it does have a bit of wear on it. The performance might not be what it would be if you were to have a much newer magnetic Lingao, but it doesn't really affect the comparison anyways. So let's get straight into it. Now, there are a few key differences between the two clocks. The first one is, and it's the most obvious one if you have both, or if you've seen videos of both clocks, it's how fast the pieces turn. The Qiyi clock has a lot smoother turning, which yes can be good, but sometimes it could be cause for overturning, because there are cases, it depends, where as you saw here I just did a 12. That's something that can happen, and it's not always consistent. As you can see here, I managed to do quite a long turn, but then if I retry to do it now, I just did a 6. So sometimes the movement can be a bit inconsistent with the pin, like for the clocks, whereas here it's a lot more consistent. Obviously this might be due to me being more used to this clock, but here if I apply the same force, I can more or less expect the same turning, whereas here sometimes, mainly if I go for these longer like 6 move turns, I sometimes get a more elongated turn, or yeah, sometimes just the piece moves a lot more than what it does if I apply the same amount of force twice. But this is, again, this is kind of a personal feeling thing. When you do these lower moves, which you're gonna be doing a lot more often in a clock solve, like you won't be doing seven moves or whatever, it is a lot more consistent. So if I can consistently do 4s, etc. Yeah, in these shorter moves, which are the more used one in a clock solve, it is a lot more consistent. Obviously, here basically I'd say it's kind of consistent up till 6. Then I find it actually harder to do anything more than 6 on this clock. So yeah, that counts to difference number 2. Here it's the clock is obviously slower than this one. As you can see, the movement it's a bit more clunky. Now again, this could be due to its age, but also through time, it's never been the fastest clock to use. Obviously, when I say fastest, I'm not saying that it slows down like your turning speed, but you can feel that the arrows don't turn as quickly as those of a Qiyi clock. So yeah, that's that. Now, key difference number 2 is the pins. Now, both obviously are magnetic, as all clocks should be nowadays. But now, I actually prefer the pins of this magnetic Lingao, because the magnets are stronger. Now, this isn't the case for all magnetic Lingaos. Some are made with weaker magnets, but I feel sometimes like they move with a bit too much ease. Now, obviously, this doesn't actually happen for my clock. Well, it just did. It's a bit more rare, but there are some cases, and a friend was showing it off one of my group's chats earlier, that if you turn the clock too quickly, there might be a small chance, mainly on how your finger is placed, that you could accidentally move a pin that you don't want to move. this has, and it has happened to me a few times in solves, but it's not really that common. But it still does happen occasionally. It could potentially ruin a good solve. Oops. Whereas here it just never happens. The magnets are extremely strong, and no matter how much force you apply to it, the pins will always stay in the correct position. So that's the difference number 2. It would be like the pin strength. Now this isn't too major. Obviously, you won't be applying too much force to your turns in a clock solve anyways. But there are certain occasions where maybe like you panic turn a bit or whatever, and it could lead to an issue during the solve. Now the third key difference, and the last key difference I'll be pointing out as well, the last key difference in general, is how the clocks are made. So you may have seen, if you've seen any of Qiyi's videos on this clock, that the pieces are magnetic. Now this is actually, basically what this means is that you will never have your clock stuck between two timings, and that is actually like very important. Now if you're new to clock, yeah, you see here, it just as soon as I try to keep it in the middle, it automatically moved. If you're new to clock, you might not understand why this is important, but on certain magnetic Lingao, it happens where like you could potentially have your clock placed like this and then turn the piece, and then now you're stuck and you need to solve the issue. And it might be hard to notice because sometimes if like Qiyi, obviously I purposely moved it, but if you're going quickly, it has happened where I tried to do a 6, got stuck like this, turned, didn't realize till like I tried moving on the other side and basically lost a good solve from it. So it does happen, and the way the clocks are structured here, it basically makes it impossible to happen. And I think if we were to like add up all the pros and cons with these clocks, that's like the biggest pro the Qiyi clock offers, which is really how the pieces function. So yeah, that's kind of like the pros and cons I had for both clocks. Personally, I still value them at a similar level. I am though gonna start practicing mainly with the Qiyi clock because sometimes change is necessary. Like when you lose motivation in an event, changing your main can make you regain that motivation. That's what's happened with this clock. I'm not sure which I still prefer more, as both, like as I'll explain later, there were similarities while doing my solves. So yeah, I'll show you guys my best averages of 5s with both clocks from my basically A of 50 session for each, like my A of 100 session, and I'll get back to you guys after that. So as you may have noticed, like obviously I managed to get a sub 7 average on both clocks, which is pretty nice. Now both average of 50s were around the high 7 mark, I think like 799, low 8 I think for this one. I think I got like a 795, something like that, average of 50 on this clock, and like a 804 on this clock. So it's basically nothing, the difference I got on both. But what I realized is, so my best average was on this clock, my best average of 5, but I mainly put that to lucky scrambles. My best average of 12, average of 20, and average of 25, along with the average of 50 was actually on this clock. Now, what I did notice is I was a lot more inconsistent on this clock rather than this one. My worst average of 5 was on this clock. I got like a 10 something, and it's basically because I kept overshooting most of the turns. So I noticed like when trying to put speed in my solve, I would end up kind of messing up out of my moves and have to do a lot of corrections in the middle of a solve. But also on this, I lost actually a very good single, like a potential sub 6, because of the issue I talked about earlier, where basically I moved back the pieces to 12. It was here when I turned, and the pin didn't go down, and it took me a while. I think like here obviously I pressed two times and these pieces moved to the correct slot, but that time round it didn't happen. Like I tried pressing down the pin, but I had to go back and fix it to then be able to go back in the solve. I ended up getting like a 9 or something, but like considering I lost like about 4 seconds fixing this, it was kind of disappointing. But yeah, overall actually they're like different. The clocks obviously have completely different feelings, and whereas on this one I had to apply a lot more force. Like all my solves like took a lot more effort to turn. It allowed me still to keep a more consistent solving speed in a way. Like obviously this could be due to me just having practiced for 2 years on this clock, but I knew that when every time I gave a certain amount of force on a move, I would more times rather than not get that distance I wanted to get. Whereas on this clock, I would find myself overshooting quite a bit. This said, I think this does have potential. Like, I feel like if you do have a new Lingao magnetic clock, I don't think it is necessary for you to buy the Qiyi clock. If you do not own a Lingao magnetic clock, I would recommend buying the Qiyi clock. It's a lot more simpler to get, mainly if you live in an area where magnetic Lingao clocks aren't as available. And finally, if you feel there's like, and yeah, that's mainly the two things. Like if you have a new well set up magnetic Lingao clock, I wouldn't call it necessary to buy the newest Qiyi clock. It could be worth trying both, but yeah, I wouldn't call it necessary. Whereas if you don't own a magnetic Lingao clock, or you've owned one for a long time and maybe want to switch, I would definitely recommend the Qiyi magnetic clock. It is the best mass-produced clock out there, without a shadow of a doubt. Like the Shengsu doesn't compare, and the Lingao either. So yeah, that's kind of, I don't think I have any much more to say about these two clocks. It's really that. That's really what I would recommend you guys to do, and that's really about it. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe. Or like the video obviously, and comment. That does help the algorithm and might show this video to a few more people that could be debating on what to do with their clocks. So yeah, that's really gonna end it. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.